right, we're here. Twitch.tv/110sports, 110sportsmedia.com/live. Thank you so much for joining us on a Friday. It's an important Friday. It's Friday before the Super Bowl Eve? That seems not nearly as epic as I'd like it to be, but that's what it is. It's Super Bowl Eve, and that's what we're going to talk about on the show today. It's a jam-packed Super Bowl show. Josh Doran, Chris Brown are here with me in their correct boxes on the overlay, I might add. Gentlemen, how are you today?
No complaints. Doing pretty good. Pretty excited about the Super Bowl. We got a lot to talk about today, and I'm learning here this morning that there are a lot of other relevant games this weekend as well. But, I think it's like, how much do you want to try to pay attention to everything else? This is one of those weekends where I'm okay just sort of like, I'll catch up on the basketball stuff later. I'll dedicate my whole weekend to just getting in that Super Bowl zone.
I have really sad news. I don't think I've told you guys this, but I work from 2 to 9 on Sunday afternoon. So there is no Super Bowl watching for me. So I'm going to get in the mood, and then I'm going to go to work from 2 to 9 on Sunday afternoon. Rough. So that's really, really sad. I'd like to pat myself on the back here because I was given like a half out. I was asked like, can you work on Sunday? And I was already in the schedule, so it's not like I wasn't in the schedule yet. So I was like, I had a little bit of pressure on me, but at the same time, I feel like I could have been like, I can't work on Sunday. I'm so sorry. And he would have been like, that's okay. We'll find somebody. Because this was like back in the middle of the week, but stuck to the schedule. But no, I'm hoping that, first of all, if anybody comes into Academy Sports and Outdoors on Sunday afternoon, what are you doing? Go home and watch the Super Bowl. What are you doing? Come on. What are you doing? So I'm hoping there's some downtime, if you will. But yes, Super Bowl weekend. Get in the mindset. Those other big games, the Mavs are playing the Warriors, as ESPN put in their email newsletter headline along with the Super Bowl. That's just disrespectful to Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. And maybe the most irrelevant, but maybe the most relevant at the same time, considering both teams need wins badly, Duke North Carolina game of all time, because typically it's irrelevant. Both teams are going to be top 4 seeds in the NCAA tournament regardless of who wins the game, right? And now now Duke needs wins, UNC needs wins, and Roy and Kay are fighting on the bubble. But of course the main part of the weekend is the Super Bowl. On the show today, we're going to break the Super Bowl down into 3 separate categories. We'll start the show with matchups to watch for, then stakes in the middle of the show. What else is at stake here other than the obvious Super Bowl ring? What does that mean for legacies of quarterbacks, of coaches, of teams, of whoever you want to throw in there? We'll talk about that in the middle of the hour. And then, of course, at the end of the show, we're going to tell you from a very fundamental and scientific standpoint who's going to win the football game, and then we'll get out of here and on to the rest of Super Bowl weekend. But we're starting with Super Bowl matchups to watch, and I'm going to throw, I guess, an obvious one, but the first time ever this is a matchup to watch for, and that's the fact that it's a home game for Tampa Bay. So the stadium versus the Chiefs, the home field advantage versus the Chiefs, because there's part of me that, first of all, if you're really mad about Tampa Bay getting a home game in the Super Bowl, then this is the right year for them to have a home game in the Super Bowl, because if nothing else, there's only 22,000 people or whatever it is that are going to be in the stands, and 8,000 of them are vaccinated health professionals and first responders and frontline workers. So probably not the most passionate Tampa Bay fans, right? There might be some Tampa Bay fans in there, but maybe not the most passionate ones. And then you're left with 14,000 people, and no matter where the Super Bowl is, the makeup of the fans in the stands are not that of a typical home game. But it will be, but if nothing else, it's a place that Tampa Bay is much more comfortable in than the Chiefs are. So let's start there. Do you guys think it's going to be, we'll just touch on this briefly and then get on to what's actually happening on the field. But do you guys think you will be able to feel it during the game that this is happening in Tampa Bay's home stadium, or once the game starts it'll just feel like it's at least to a certain extent is just a neutral site Super Bowl for both teams?
You'll probably be able to tell a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but you hit on the three important points for me. One, obviously, less fans, less of an impact. Two, it's not like generally speaking, these are the Buccaneers tickets to give away, even if it was full capacity. You're talking about a different demographic at the Super Bowl than you are at your typical Week 7 home game for the Buccaneers. And three, I think the biggest benefit is not necessarily going to be the crowd, but it's the comfort factor that you mentioned, Josh, that you don't have to go travel somewhere and go stay in a hotel all week while you're dealing with all this media, and you get to be with your family and you're going into your sort of pregame routine, and you're going into the stadium is all what you do 8 times a year anyway during the regular season. So I think there is, and it's the same conversation about college basketball and why teams are still more successful at home than on the road, even if it's not the same as in other years. Having that home court advantage still makes a difference. So I think there is a benefit to it, but I find it very hard to believe we're going to look back on this and go, the fact it was in Tampa really ended up making the difference in the end.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't have too much to add. I would say it's just as well that, yeah, I think there may be a few times in the game, where it's clear that the crowd, it was clear that this game is in Tampa Bay, where you're reminded, oh yeah, this is in Tampa. But yeah, I think it's much more for me. I think it's much more that, again, that comfort level for the Bucks than it is that I really think that the Chiefs are going to suffer by playing, are going to be really hurt by playing this game in Tampa Bay. Like I think it's much more to the Bucks significantly more comfortable by being at home than are the Chiefs going to be really thrown off balance. This is a team that doesn't need to really prove that that this is an experienced team. This isn't some really young team that's just now made it to the Super Bowl for the first time in years and years, and we don't know how they're going to handle the pressure. It's the Chiefs, so I'm not too concerned from that angle. I echo what you guys have said.
Yeah, the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl last year, so it's not like these guys don't know how to handle Super Bowl week. If it was a first year,
right?
If it was a quarterback going to the Super Bowl for the first time, and he was having to figure out how to do that for the first time, and also at the same time Tom Brady was getting to sleep in his own bed, then I think it has the potential to have even more of an impact. But because it's Patrick Mahomes, because that dude knows what it's like to be in a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, and the fact that I am genuinely curious to hear what the cheers sound like. Mm-hmm. Right? Because generally in the Super Bowl, the cheers sound the exact same regardless of which team is making the play, right?
Right.
Will it sound the same when it's a home team? I think that it will, and I think, between the pumped-in sound and the sound that's actually being made in the stadium, it'll sound pretty similar regardless of who's actually making the plays. But those other things, maybe to a certain extent, the off-field things, right, are the things that might have a bigger impact for a home team. Anyways, I think that's an interesting part of this. I continue to be intrigued by how big of a story that is not. It's just sort of mentioned in passing. I always thought that when that finally happened, it would be what we talked about all week, and there are just other more important things to talk about. So let's move on to the field. Give me a matchup you're looking for either side of the football, or if it's on the sidelines, whether it's your most important, whether it's a peripheral. What's one of the matchups you're looking for?
I've got two that I really want to emphasize. One of them I'll say, but the one that I'm really curious about that I think is not one of the more obvious ones is Kansas City's secondary against Tampa's offensive weapons. Because if from my perspective, this is about can the Buccaneers match up with the Chiefs, that you have to do something to beat the Chiefs. The Chiefs are the better team on paper. That's not a hot take by any means. So instead of focusing on what Patrick Mahomes has to do to be successful, I'm focusing on what can the Buccaneers do to stop him, and can the Buccaneers score enough points to hang with the Chiefs? Because I feel like we know more about the Chiefs than the Buccaneers. So the way that this Chiefs secondary is set up, their best players are the safeties, led by Tyrann Mathieu. The corners are kind of just sort of movable parts. They've got 7 guys who have started at least 3 times and played in at least half their games in the secondary. Now, they've done some positional shifting depending on who's injured or whatever it might be, but it's Tyrann Mathieu. You got a couple other guys that play safety or can come down and play nickel or whatever it might be. But it's not like you have a shutdown corner that's the star of the secondary. The star is Tyrann Mathieu, who is just a playmaker that does everything. You can put him in the box. You can put him on Gronk. You can put him on the slot receiver, whatever it might be. That's what makes him so special, why he's an all-pro, is he can do a little bit of everything and he just makes plays. So in a sense that works out really well, because one of the beautiful things about this Buccaneers offense, right, is the fact that it's not one receiver, it's not one weapon. It's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Gronk and Leonard Fournette and Antonio Brown. You keep going down the list. We'll see how healthy Brown is, but so in one sense that works out really nicely for the Chiefs, because it's not like they're built on taking one guy out of the game. That's not what they do. Although they were pretty successful doing it with Stephon Diggs anyway. On the flip side of that, though, you got to stop somebody.
Yeah.
And so, can any of these corners who are not viewed as elite step up, and can they do what they did against Stephon Diggs in the AFC Championship game? Or is Tampa Bay going to win all of these matchups and Brady's going to have his choice of who he's throwing to because all his guys are open all game? So I just find this sort of the way that this is set up with the variety and the depth of both of these teams when you're talking about the Buccaneers passing game and the Chiefs secondary very interesting. So that's one thing I'm looking for, is can all of Tampa Bay's weapons win these individual matchups, or is this going to be the Tyrann Mathieu show and these corners are going to show up and really play well?
The difference between last week or 2 weeks ago and this week is that there are other guys that genuinely scare me after wide receiver 1.
Exactly.
For Tampa Bay. It's what we learned in the AFC Championship game is that for the most part, the Bills' offense isn't nearly as terrifying as it looks on paper if you can stop Stephon Diggs.
And you have the ability to double him and things like that, which you just don't in this game.
Right. Because, I mean, we're talking Stephon Diggs is the best wide receiver on that team, and Cole Beasley is probably 2, right? And while Cole Beasley is very good at what he does in particular, nobody's putting Cole Beasley in the top 10 of wide receivers in the NFL, right? At least probably not.
Oh, no.
But you're putting, and you might not be putting Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in the same, in the top 10, but maybe in the top 15.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
So, and then you add Gronk, which I kind of feel like Gronk in the Super Bowl can be a little bit like LeBron in the playoffs. Like, it doesn't matter what he's done all season, or LeBron can just find another level whenever he wants to in the playoffs. And I'm scared of Gronk having 6 catches for 100 yards in any big game he plays in, just because if you're not paying attention to him, he's still physically one of the most ridiculous football players ever, right? And if you let him, he was a couple inches away from having a really big impact on, I think it was the Saints game, right? I think there were a couple plays early in that game that he barely, missed catches by 3 inches, and he would have had 80 yards in that game. That's the difference here for me is can they right, and then you have Leonard Fournette, whether it's coming out of the backfield as part of the passing game, which he was has been a big part in at points during the playoffs. It's easy to feel not nearly as scared about the Bills if you're able to stop Stephon Diggs and make other guys beat you. But there are some other guys on the Tampa Bay side of things, regardless of who you decide to treat as Stephon Diggs, that you also really have to worry about because they're also terrifying. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, for me, I had this sort of two big points as well, but I can kind of group them together because it's very much along the same theme for each, which is pressure on the quarterbacks.
Yep.
Now, we know, like, first off, I don't think I don't think many people are actually predicting either of these quarterbacks to have a bad game. Like, nobody's, I mean, maybe I'm sure there's somebody, but the consensus is not like, oh, some quarterbacks can go out there and just completely fall apart. There's no expectation of that. This is a game that could very well come down to the margins, to small things, to just a couple, one drive or two. And one thing I'm looking at is just the pressure on the quarterbacks. First with Tom Brady against Steve Spagnuolo, who was the first defensive coordinator to ever beat Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. He won each of his first three Super Bowls in 2001, 2003, 2004, and the first time he lost was against the Giants defense run by Steve Spagnuolo, who's of course currently Kansas City's defensive coordinator. And that Patriots team was one of the best of all time. They were the highest scoring offense in NFL history at the time, and the Giants were able to slow them down and slow Brady down by keeping him off of his rhythm and under constant pressure. And that is the task here. And back in week 12, which, yes, of course, the Bucs of now are not the Bucs of week 12, but Brady was sacked just once in that game, but there were 8 quarterback hits on him, and he was not allowed to function as he normally would because they applied a good deal of pressure on him. Spagnuolo's going to run an aggressive defense. So I'm watching that Kansas City defensive line to see what they can do to make Brady uncomfortable from the start, or what they can or can't do. Because obviously the Chiefs have an offense to where, we know Brady is capable of comebacks, of course, in games, but the Chiefs have this offense where it could be too late by the time Brady gets it figured out if the Chiefs are able to come out of the gate applying a lot of pressure to him and making him uncomfortable. And on the other side of it, the Chiefs' offensive line is really, really banged up. Mahomes was great, again, referencing that Week 12 matchup. He was really, really great back in Week 12 against the Bucs, 462 passing yards. But right tackle Mitchell Schwartz is out with a back injury. Eric Fisher, a season-ending Achilles injury in the AFC Championship game. Kansas City has been filling holes by shifting guys around, the whole next man up sort of spirit for their offensive line. But the Bucs pass rush with Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaquille Barrett, among others, it's fierce. Like, it's a really legitimate thing. And so what are they going to do in turn to disrupt Mahomes? And how much is it going to matter? Is he going to be able to adjust? If they are disruptive, is he going to be able to adjust with quicker, shorter passes? Is he going to just be able to do what he does and scramble all over the place? Is it going to make a difference? So that's one thing I'm watching just on both ends. How much, it's something I'm watching out of the gate too, because it's the kind of thing that it could make in a game where one score, or it could come down to very close, it could be something not at the end necessarily, but something at the beginning, a slow start that a team just isn't able to overcome. So those are the two things that I'm going to be watching. And it's really one big point.
And look, what is the one theme that has run through Tom Brady's 3 Super Bowl losses?
Mm-hmm.
It's plays made by the defensive line. The fact that you can get pressure with 4 or 5, you don't need to blitz. And yes, he carved up the Eagles, but when you look back at the defining plays of that game, outside of the Philly special, it's the play that Derek Barnett made. It's what that defensive line was still able to do at the very end when you needed one play, because it was just who was going to get a stop, because those teams were destroying each other and just running up and down the field. Even as he destroyed that really good defense, that defense still made it play. That is this, and of course, both Giants games as well. And the other part of this too is that when Brady has protection, and that interior of that offensive line is as good as any in football, and Chris Jones is as good as an interior defensive lineman as anybody in football outside of Aaron Donald. He's that good. But when Brady's been protected, it's easy to forget that he's 42, 42, 43. I'm blanking
Yeah.
on the age right now, but
Way older than a Super Bowl quarterback should be.
right, right. That nobody's done this at this age before. But when he is under pressure, it's very easy to remember and see that he is not Tom Brady of old. And especially that one interception he threw where he was just kind of tossing the ball away and didn't even get it out of bounds is an example of that. That this is the one theme. It is why I picked the Eagles to win that Super Bowl. I had no other justification other than, look, that defensive line gets pressure. If there's a formula to beat Brady, they've got it. Now, it's a little bit different. His weapons are better. It's a different year, different team, all that stuff. But I'm right there with you, Chris. And the same question with, look, Patrick Mahomes is not going to be as effective if that offensive line can't hold up. And it's not like these are the best offensive linemen the Chiefs have available to.
And it's not like the wheels of Patrick Mahomes are at 100% either. Now, they clearly weren't.
Right.
We weren't talking about Mahomes' busted toe during the AFC Championship game. He was phenomenal. I mean, we're talking 325, 29 of 38, and 3 touchdowns. So clearly it wasn't that big of an issue. But if there's a game in which Mahomes' mobility might be limited a little bit, it would be this one, and one that you'd want all of your guys to be there on the offensive line. And also, I think it's indisputable that the guys that are coming at you from the Bucks defensive line are a little more scary and talented than what's coming at you from the Bills defensive line, from an individual perspective. Couple things, and this is the matchup that I think to a certain extent, if the Bucks don't do this, there's only so much Tom Brady can do. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill combined for 22 catches on exactly 290 yards receiving last week. Travis Kelce in his 2 playoff games this year, 21 catches for 227 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Chiefs have the 2 best weapons on the field. It's Travis Kelce and it's Tyreek Hill. If the Bucks don't stop one of them, or at least contain one of them, the Chiefs are going to score 38 points again. Byron Pringle, 3 catches for 22 yards. That was the next best receiver for the Chiefs last week, 2 weeks ago. Guys not named Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce had a combined total of 7 catches. And Patrick Mahomes had 29 completions. If you don't stop one of them, you're not going to win the football game. You're just not. I mean, and I don't think what I've seen from the Bucs offense does not instill complete confidence in me. If that the Chiefs put up 38 again in the Super Bowl, the way that they put up 38 in the AFC Championship game, I don't have a ton of confidence that the Bucs can win that football game. And especially if you're going to let Darrell Williams run for 52 yards and a touchdown, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is also going to have a touchdown, then it becomes very harder to stop the Chiefs offense than it already is, even with just Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. That's if you ask me to rank in order from most important to least important matchups, maybe getting pressure on Brady or keeping pressure off of Brady could be one if you wanted to, but finding a way to at the very least contain either Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce is probably the most important thing for me in this football, because I'm not sold that if they just let them run wild that the Bucs are going to score enough points to win this game.
Completely. Back in that, I had it written down here, back in that Week 12 matchup,
Yeah.
Hill in the first quarter, over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now the Bucs settled in after that, but the damage had already been done, and that was a huge reason why the Chiefs ended up coming out on top in that game. So I'm looking to see, like, are they going to have? I have to believe they're going to have learned from that what happened. But I mean, that was just, Hill just completely was all over the place in that first quarter. I mean, in a good way, he was running all over the place, over 200 yards. So they cannot afford to let that kind of thing happen again. And the thing is, they could sort of double down on, we're not going to let that happen again. But then in the meantime, somebody else could hurt you. There's so many. So I don't know how they're going to. That's a huge thing that I'm looking for as well, is they cannot let one player just completely run over them, and they can't let it get out of hand early in this game, like what happened back in week 12.
And to that point, I mean, Tyreek Hill, 13 catches, 269 yards.
3 touchdowns.
And they only lost by 3. You know why? Because Travis Kelce, it was 882 and 0 touchdowns. If you control, it's not like the Chiefs are going to run the football. At least not.
Right.
They're not going to hang their hat on it, right? I mean, they're 87 yards of total rushing in that game. It probably will be comparable, if not less, in this one, unless it's raining. The point being is that Tyreek Hill had his best game of the season against the Bucs, and the Bucs only lost by 3. Yes, they scored 14 unanswered in the fourth quarter, so it probably wasn't quite that close. But my point is still the same: is you can let Tyreek Hill do what he just did, do what he did in that week, and still find a way to hold the Chiefs to only 27 points if you're not letting everybody beat you, right?
And that's where I'm looking at this thing going, I don't think they're stopping Tyreek Hill.
Sure.
Partially because they don't have an elite corner, and partially because he's just that much faster than everybody else. Right. So I'm looking at Devin White and saying, the way that guy's playing right now and his skill set, he is one of the few guys that I feel like might be able to actually have some success against Travis Kelce. You're not going to shut him out. You're not going to make him a complete non-factor. But, can you hold him to 5 catches for 60 yards and keep him out of being a go-to guy in the red zone? Things like that. Can you hold him to a field goal because you defended him well on 3rd down? Can you get a sack because you got good coverage on him one play?
Right.
Whatever it might be. I'm looking at Kelce as the guy that's more likely to be stopped than Hill. I've just kind of given up. Like 13, 269, 3 touchdowns. I mean,
which is also just a horrible situation to be in. Is that Kelsey's the one that you're probably going to have a better chance of stopping?
But it just, but even outside of just the fact that I think he's still a better matchup than Hill, just the way that this Buccaneers roster is built. Devin White is on a level where I could see him really having a big impact in this game outside of the box score by just doing a really good job in this area.
Sure. Oh, to be clear, I completely agree with you. It's just a really crappy puzzle to try to solve. Is that okay? We probably can't guard Tyreek Hill, so maybe we'll try to stop the best tight end in football right now. One of the two, depending on who you ask.
The second most unguardable player in football.
Right. That's just a horrible spot to be in, and when you. And it's not hard to understand why the Chiefs are in the position that they are again when you have Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and the list goes on. The list goes on and on. Any other matchups you want to get in here real quick before we go to break?
Those were my 3. Kansas City secondary versus Tampa's weapons. Travis Kelce and the Buccaneers interior offensive line against Chris Jones in that battle with the pass rush?
It's obvious to say, and the things that we've touched on sort of get at, the team that wins the matchups that we just touched on will have a big impact on the granddaddy of all the matchups, and that's Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes, right? Whoever has the better quarterback in this game, whoever turns in the better performance, that team's going to have a really good shot to win. And all of these other matchups get at some of the more important details of what will impact those things, whether it's pass protection or being able to contain Kelce or Hill, or being able to contain Tom Brady's weapons, right? But I feel like it would be unjust of us to go through an entire matchups segment about the Super Bowl and not mention the fact that it's Tom Brady versus Patrick Mahomes is also there as well, but there's some obviousness to that one, but wanted to mention it. Coming up next, we'll do what's at stake, of course, other than a Super Bowl ring, right? That one's obvious. Maybe some of the less obvious ones, some legacy oriented type stuff. We'll do that next. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.